My colleague he gives us a tip and saying basically, and I say this not to go into too much source and methods, but we have a selector and for an Al-Qaeda operative operating in who's moving into our AOR. They were in Balad's AOR and then they were moving into our AOR. So he's like punting over to us and he's like, well, we can't do anything at this point anyway because I'm not operating. I'm not able to operate like you guys are, but we could. So what we did is we were able to figure out that they had located themselves in this village called Hawija. Now, Hawija was southwest of Kirkuk, but Hawija had been a hotbed. The army, it was like Fallujah was to the Marine Corps, Hawija was to the army. It was a hornet's nest. And the army got just torn up in there, but they did clean up a lot of it, but it was still a lot of insurgent activity, but specifically we were seeing Al-Qaeda and then Islamic State operating out of there. And we just generally kind of kept them at bay, but IEDs, some rocket attacks would a lot of times we would get information that it would originate from Hawija. So it didn't surprise us when we found out this Al-Qaeda operative was in Hawija. So we started putting together a target package. And again, we're working through the Iraqi system. In this case, though, the problem is that we would work with Kirkuk police, or there was some army in Kirkuk that we worked through the Iraqi police, that helped vet us. But now, because we were going into Hawija, it was completely different jurisdiction. So we were going to have to now work with, and in that case, it was Iraqi army, and we had never worked with them before. So what we ended up doing, again, we went through the whole process, judicial process. We got our arrest warrants, and we got some of our Iraqi police who we trusted, and then we drove out and we met this Iraqi army unit on the way. Now, when we were driving out there, we go through there's this road that is just IED highway, and it was a road that just went straight out of Kirkuk and it would go straight to Baghdad, but it was always laden with IEDs. I mean, I hated to be on that road, and we'd always have to do our timing right when they would do the IED sweeps, just to time it right. I mean, if I wasn't on the mission and my people were on a mission, they were on there, I was never able to sleep. Give me a call when you're check in, whatever. But we went through this road, and we and as we go through, we make it through, and then we end up linking up with this Iraqi army unit, and we have our conversation about what we're going to do. They knew advance but didn't have the details. Well, by the letter of law, they're supposed to be leading. So we're like, okay, we're following. Now, at that point where we're at is like now you go and essentially you're going west. Like there was an intersection. You go south, and then there's an intersecting road, and then you go west, and that goes straight into Hawija. And instead of turning to go that road to Hawija, they kept going straight.
Hmm.
And we're just going and going, and it's finally like I couldn't take it. My stress level, and I'm just like, they're going to take us into an ambush. Like we're halfway to Baghdad. And finally I start making calls on the radio. I'm like, stop. And so we stopped because it was a convoy. And then the Iraqis figured it out. And then we all get together, and they were confused. And that's where you learn, like you can have a map out, but such a cultural difference. If you point things out on a map and whatever, they're not going to understand. There's like, well, there's this structure on the road, like this, or this tree, or there's something. It's very spatial in terms of directions, and that's what they understood. So it was a quick lesson in you better understand each other's cultures to understand how to communicate. But it was the first time we literally had worked with them, and just a lack of understanding, right? Um, at that point, we're like, we're leading, and we were technically not, but we can't do this, right? So we get back on and we're way behind schedule, and we drive into Hawija, and we get in there and we realize the MRAPs, because we took MRAPs, we can't get into these alleyways. It's too small. And so at that point, we dismounted and we had to keep most of our contingent at the MRAPs. And at that point, it's almost like they became a QRF. We had to, but they literally are this most of the security element remain there on the heavy weapons, and
And
smaller unit.
those are Iraqis.
What's that?
Those are Iraqis. The ones who
No,
stay.
this was my security element.
Okay, yeah.
Stayed there. The Iraqis realized like they couldn't really get through either. So we were all dismounting and we're literally going through. And the problem is, like, we knew where we were going to hit based off of aerial imagery, right? But it's in the middle of the night, there's no lights, and they all look the same. So you're taking your best guess. So we're literally going through, and now the dogs are barking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're sitting ducks. And my team and some of the Iraqis, like a good contingent, they just we couldn't get the vehicles in. So they're all in a certain location. But like we're caught out there. We're light weapons at that point. And so I remember we're running, right? Because we're trying to move as quickly as we can. And I remember I had this agent. She was a lieutenant, and she was great. She'd only been in the country a couple weeks. Like this was, I think maybe her first operation, and like, wow, this is really intense. I remember her running next to me, and she stepped in a hole in the ground, and she was very athletic. And I remember after that, like I pulled her out, and she was hobbling. I wonder to this day if she doesn't have knee damage. But we continued, and then my ops officer he was leading our efforts on this because he had been working with the folks who were doing ISR overhead and such. And we get to what he thinks is the house, but he's not sure. I mean, he is just not 100%. Again, because the Iraqis were the ones who were supposed to be actually hitting this. We're following them, but now suddenly we're leading. Because if we had turned it over to them, I don't know where we would have been. It would have been a disaster. So we're standing on the outside of this house, and there's this big wall, right? That is on the other side is their courtyard. And I remember my ops officer, his name is Vern. I said, and I'm talking to him, I said, Vern, give me your best confidence level, right? He goes, 80%. And he makes some signal like that, the Iraqis see that and say it's a go. Suddenly they're like charging over the wall and they're going through the house. And we're still standing there like, okay, 80%. I guess that was it. I go through the house, and as it turns out, we got two high-level Al-Qaeda operatives. It was a brother. Yeah. And so we detain them, and then we do site exploitation. And the wife is still there. We leave her. We get out of town, and as we're heading back, we're taking that highway, and then it goes east at that point, and then it shoots north up to Kirkuk, and that was that ID highway that we talked about. We get out there, and we're traveling a little bit, and next thing you know, it's blocked. There had been a convoy that had come through during that time period that we were doing the operation that just got, I mean, it was a mess. It was all over the road. It was bad, really bad.
From ID explosions.
Yeah, yeah. And again, like it was just so common, right? And overhead, we got an air cav unit. It's just doing overhead protection. And we're sitting out there. And then I will tell you this, my team, they I would put this without going too much into this. We got we did some things behind the scenes when we were at the site, at the house, so that we would continue to have intelligence.
Hmm.
And we got pinged, or we were getting information out of that some calls were being made, and it was essentially that, and it was, I paraphrase, and they called it and I remember the wife started making calls. So the Americans and the Kurds, they actually weren't, the Iraqi army weren't Kurds. They were some Kurds, but not all. But she said the Kurds and the Americans just came here and this is what they did. So now there's a call out to go after us. And here we are, we're stuck on this highway going nowhere. So like we've got these two high-level Al-Qaeda operators, that we've got in our MRAP detained. I'm like, we got to get out of here. We need to get them in because at that point the Iraqi army had left. They're like, you're out of our AOR. And so now it was just us and our team stuck because of this IED blast.
How many were with your team?
At any given time, we were probably, I don't know, maybe 25 of
Hmm.
us. Yeah.
So when you're there, did you set up I mean, did you have to set up a defensive perimeter or what are you doing? Just sitting in,
So,
what are you
so
doing?
at this point, like we're stuck, right? We're in a convoy. And here's the beauty of this situation. And is that air cab unit
Okay.
was we had a great working relationship with them. It's kind of funny because here it was sort of the joke, like here they are Army Air and we're Air Force and we're on the ground.
Hmm.
And so it was kind of a funny thing. So we knew them really well and we did operations with them and they would regularly provide us support. And I remember because they thought, I still remember some of the pilots and they thought that what we did was just really a cool mission. So they called down and our call sign was Raven. And they called down and says, "Hey, Raven, we're providing overhead support. We're going to get you around this mess." So they literally dropped chem lights out in the desert for us to follow and so we're driving out in the desert following these chem lights that they were dropping from the heli. And so we got around the crash site or the explosion site and got back on the highway and we were able to get into Kirkuk City where we met with the Kirkuk police and then we turned the Al-Qaeda members over to the Kirkuk police. But um, it doesn't have a happy ending because I'll tell you what, that the same team that had provided us support, who we were friends with, the next night there was an operation and they had mid-air crash and those pilots were killed.